Have you ever wondered why some people can see into the spirit world, but others can't? Most people were sad, and there were very few dry eyes in the building as the preacher shared memories of the deceased. But young children, as you know, don't always do well sitting quietly during extended periods of time while those pesky adults ramble. And little Marie Watson wasn't the exception. She sat there because she had to, but she fidgeted nearly the entire time. Finally, the pastor concluded the funeral and everyone stood up and began to shuffle out. And as her mother was saying her goodbyes, little Marie rushed past everyone and went across the yard to the little cemetery that was beside the church, and she began playing with another little girl who was there. Of course, not realizing that they were actually in a cemetery, just girls being girls, playing imagination, having fun. Well, after a few minutes of talking with family and friends standing outside of the church, her mother noticed that Marie was missing.
And my mom started yelling for me because the wind started picking up. And when I turned around, the little girl was gone and I panicked. And my mom was like, we have to go. I'm like, I'm not leaving this little girl. And I panicked to the point that the pastor of the church that we were at the cemetery came over. And I'm like, this little girl, she's in this blue dress. It's just this cute little bow. I said she was super sweet. And the pastor's face just turned white. And he took me over to this grave. And he's like, and there was this little, those little emblems. It had this little picture of her. And he said, is that the girl? And of course, I don't know any different. I'm like, yeah, that's the girl. And the pastor just looked at me and he was like, honey, she died like 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago.
When we spoke with Marie Watson about this experience, well, she was all grown up, and this had happened to her when she was very young. And she said that she hadn't had any memories of being afraid. But Donna Stone was an adult when she had her experience. Her grandmother died in December of 1984 when Stone was 22 years old. And the very next month, during a church service where her grandfather was preaching, she saw her dead grandmother materialize up on the stage right beside her grandfather.
She materialized right to his left. And I kept blinking my eyes. No one else in the church noticed a thing. I looked at family members continually, but they didn't even flinch. So I kept shutting my eyes thinking I'm just seeing things, but no, I was not. Everywhere he moved, she moved. He went and sit down behind the pulpit, and she went and sat down with him. He came back up to the pulpit, began to preach again, and she was there. She never showed herself to anyone else in my family. So, and she was my best friend, and maybe that was her way of saying, hey, I'm still here and I love you.
Welcome to Velarcana. Here, we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband tells the stories.
Neither Marie Watson, who was very young when she had her experience, nor Donna Stone, who was an adult when she had hers, were afraid of seeing something that mainstream science says is absolutely impossible. But most people are afraid when they see stuff like this. And some people claim that they've seen things that just seem downright evil. Perhaps something in their soul attracts darker spirits, like with Susan Driver.
And I woke up to see standing over me what to me looked like the Grim Reaper. I screamed bloody murder, and I couldn't even stop screaming. I just screamed and screamed.
Skeptics, like myself, would say that these people must be delusional or lying, or maybe they really did see something, but it can't be mysterious spirits from another realm, right? But then again, I think that that's just a little bit pompous of me, isn't it? Discounting other people's experiences because I personally haven't had one, or because what they say that they see doesn't quite fit into my worldview. And you know, these types of experiences don't just come from your average Julia or your average Joe either. Several prominent and credible individuals over the years have come forward claiming that they too have seen something that the rest of us just don't. Senator and Nobel Prize winner William Butler Yeats was adamant that spirits from other realms do indeed exist, and he even claimed to have had several encounters with them himself. Once, while he was walking in the country, he and a group of his friends all claimed that they saw spirits.
We all saw spirits in some shape or another. I've seen a spiritual being shaped like a man come out of a bright light, stand before me.
So, if we can suspend our own ideas of what we think reality is for the next 20 minutes or so and say, okay, maybe something that I don't quite understand might be happening here, then I guess it seems like there are two questions. One, why are some people terrified when something like this takes place while others aren't? And two, what exactly is it that people are seeing? Well, to offer possible explanations to these questions, we're going to share two short mysteries. First, we'll take a look at how a lady named Satin Tidwell claims that she actually helped the spirit of a young man realize that he was dead. And then we'll share the absolutely terrifying experiences of Susan Driver. According to Susan, a paralyzingly dark force periodically visited her throughout her entire life, and it became more and more prominent as she got older, until finally it infiltrated her dreams and then terrorized her for years. As we share these two stories, please keep in mind that there just might be more people who believe in this than you think. It surprised me to discover that a Gallup poll taken just last year showed that a whopping 58% of all United States citizens are either unsure or do in fact believe that spiritual entities exist. And a solid 39% of them know for certain that something other than just the physical exists. And I have to tell you, that blew my mind. But no doubt, very few are like the lady in our first mystery. Satin not only believes that spirits exist, no, she says that she's deeply connected with the spirit world.
And see, a lot of people don't understand, like, I see spirits all the time.
Satin Tidwell had taken her teenage son to the library, and as he was perusing different books, she found a table, sat down, and then began flipping through a magazine. Not long after she arrived, this young man approached her.
And it seemed like he was trying to get my attention, but then he would kind of just fade away, like he would just walk away. And then he came back, and then this time he kind of like nudged something on the table, and I was like, "Excuse you?"
Satin said that she instantly knew that this guy was no ordinary flesh and blood individual, and she said that her response took him by complete surprise.
And he goes, "You can see me." I said, "Yes."
This young man told Satin that for some reason no one else could see him, and of course no one else would respond to him. Well, they spoke for a few moments, and then he asked Satin if she would help him figure things out. So she began to ask him questions, but as she did, she quickly discovered that his memory had holes.
He just kept saying, "My name is," and he would just stop. And it was like he was stuck, like he couldn't remember what his name was.
So she asked him if he might remember why he was at the library.
And he goes, "I came to this library at least once a month with my friends."
He said that he could remember reserving a room and that he and his friends would all gather here and play games. Well, shortly after this, Satin's son came up and he said that he had already checked out his book and he was ready to leave. So, not really knowing what else to do, Satin told this young man that she really couldn't help him. Good luck, and then she left. But later that night, she just couldn't get the experience out of her head.
And I was like, I wonder if I went back to that library, if he would be there. So the next day, I was off work, took my son to school, and I was like, I'm going back. And I sat in my car for probably 30 minutes and was like, do I really want to do this? And then I go back in the library, and I'm just trying to see if I see him, because, you know, it's the middle of the day. The library is empty. There's barely anybody in there, but it's a big library. So I was like, I'm just going to go back to where I was. So I go back over there. I'm just flipping through a magazine, and he comes back.
Satin said that they spoke for a few minutes, but he still couldn't remember much or anything about who he was.
And I was like, okay, so you said that you come to the library all the time. Do you know any librarian here that was here when you were here? And he goes, oh, yes, my favorite one. Her name is Sherry.
So Satin got up from the table and then went over to the help desk, and she could see that the lady's name tag said Sherry. So she asked if the lady knew a young man who might have come into the library quite often, but might have recently passed away.
And then she just looks at me. Her eyes get all big, and she goes, hold on 1 second.
The lady stopped, and she thought about it for a second, and then she reached beneath the counter and she retrieved a pamphlet with a memorial announcement on it. She handed it to Satin and asked her, are you talking about Aaron?
And as soon as she said that, he was like, yes, yes, yes. And he was like, that's my name.
The librarian said that Aaron had been a regular at the library and that everyone there was very fond of him, so much so that they all went to his memorial when he died. Well, even though Aaron accepted that he was the person in the pamphlet, he still didn't accept the idea that he had died, and he still wanted answers. So since Satin was the only person who could see or hear him, he continued to follow her around. Well, eventually, in an attempt to help convince him that he actually had died, Satin did a little bit of her own detective work, and she found out that his family had plots in a specific cemetery. And one day, she took Aaron to that cemetery and found the family plots. And with an educated guess, she picked one out. And she told Aaron, that is your plot. So you most certainly are dead. But Aaron, well, he still wasn't convinced.
And he just sat there and stared at it forever because he was like, this isn't even supposed to be my plot. This is supposed to be my mom's plot. And I was like, well, it was probably already bought, so they put you here. I was like, I know my family, that's what we do. There's plots already bought, and so whoever comes first gets them. And it was just him in denial for a while, like, because he was just like, no, because this isn't where I was supposed to be buried. And he kept saying that he wanted to be cremated.
Well, Satin said that she kept working with Aaron, trying to help him understand that he had indeed passed on and that he was buried in that plot. And she said that she actually took him back to the cemetery 3 times. But each time that she did, he would say the same thing, that that was not his plot because he was supposed to have been cremated. Well, eventually he stopped coming around, and Satin had believed that he must have accepted that he was dead and that that was his plot and then moved on. And that's when the story came to us. Satin is one of our subscribers, and she had actually seen a banner below one of our videos asking anyone who has had experiences with the unexplainable to email Amy. Well, we got this information from Satin, we did this interview with her, and then Amy started digging. On Friday, August 5th, 2011, at 3:50 in the morning, 28-year-old Aaron R. Cooper was hit by a semi-truck, and he died instantly. His memorial service was held at Alexander Funeral Home in Evansville on August 8th, 2011. He was remembered as being a fun-loving, creative individual who enjoyed spending time at the library playing games with his friends. Well, as part of her research, Amy contacted the cemetery where his family held plots, hoping that we might be able to get a picture of this plot so we could put it in our video during the show. Now, check this out. When she asked the cemetery for this information, they told her, I'm very sorry, ma'am, we can't get you a picture of his plot because Aaron, well, he was cremated. Spooky, isn't it? Satin told Amy that she has had this ability her entire life, and seeing otherworldly spirits is seldom, if ever, a scary experience for her. But that wasn't the case with Susan Driver. Susan Driver, another one of our subscribers, also emailed us about her experiences, and after going back and forth with her a bit, we actually were able to meet with her in person. She told us that she's been sensitive to otherworldly feelings most of her life, and it's terrified her. She also said that some dark presence might have attached itself to her when she was very young. It all started right around her 10th birthday. She and a friend named Lisa had been playing with the Ouija board, and there really wasn't anything out of the ordinary at first. But as children do, they push the limits, asking all types of questions, hoping, of course, to see if maybe some mysterious entity just might give them answers. But it never did. From that moment forward, however, something changed. Susan said that every once in a while she would begin to feel this dark presence in her life, and occasionally it would even become tangible and actually interact with the physical world. Like one night when she had just settled into her bed to go to sleep, and then something terrifying happened.
There was an instance when I was laying in my bed trying to go to sleep, and I felt somebody sit down on the end of my bed.
Susan sat up immediately, expecting, of course, to see a person, but there was no one there. Can you imagine feeling your bed depress and then sitting up right away and seeing that no one else was in the room? That would absolutely terrify me. Well, this is where it started, and then over the years, she had more frightening experiences, and eventually she began to see dark shadows, like the time that her and her husband were in a hotel in Asheville, North Carolina.
And I chose a hotel called Princess Anne Hotel, which is a very, very old hotel which had been turned into a bed and breakfast. It's really cool, had the spiral staircase and had the caged elevator, that you had to close the cages, and it was a really neat place. So in the middle of the night, I woke up and I just was feeling something malevolent. And I looked over into the hallway area and saw a dark shadow. And it was darker than dark. I mean, it was a shape in the hallway that was, darker than dark, blacker than black. So it stood out.
She said that a moment later it was gone, but she could still sense this negative presence in the room. Well, these experiences continued, and then in 2012, she started having these horrible dreams.
I started having horrific nightmares every night. I mean, terrifying nightmares. It was like objects were coming to life, objects that should not be coming to life, things grabbing hold of my ankles and pulling me in the bed, and just things that would terrify someone in real life. And of course, I'm dreaming, and it's very realistic, and that went on for probably a good 2 years. The nightmares did, until one morning, Chris had fallen asleep on the couch, and I was asleep in the bed, and I woke up to see standing over me what to me looked like the Grim Reaper. It was very black, again, blacker than black. I screamed bloody murder. I couldn't even stop screaming. I just screamed and screamed, and Chris came running down the hall.
And when I first came in, I looked over in the corner, and there was this black figure there, which actually took a step back and like, what the hell? There was a little light in the room, coming through the curtains, but there wasn't anything that could have caused a shadow. This was definitely a standalone, whatever it was.
As you can see, Chris did not want his face on camera, but he agreed to share what he saw. Later, when the cameras were off, he told us that he's the world's biggest skeptic, and he has no idea what that was. But we did film him saying that he absolutely saw something.
I definitely saw something. Can't tell you what it was. Well, I know it was black and kind of, but I really can't explain it.
Well, after that experience, waking up with the Grim Reaper leaning over her bed, Susan had had enough, and she started to look for answers. She got on the internet, and she Googled everything that she could think of. And eventually, she found a site called Seers See, which was started by a man named Doug Overmyer. Doug is a Christian minister, but his belief in the spirit world didn't just come through scripture. No. When his daughter was very young, she would often talk about things that weren't there. And at first, of course, he and his wife thought that, well, this was just a little girl with a very active imagination. But over time, certain events took place that led him and his wife to believe that their daughter actually could see things that the rest of us just can't. So, in an effort to help their daughter, they began researching, looking for any information that they could find on why and how some people can see otherworldly spirits. And as they did, they discovered that a lot of the information that was out there regarding this mysterious ability was wrong, and either full of bad advice or just flat out lies. So, Doug assembled the quality information that he had found, and in 2012, he created the website Seers See, which of course is a website dedicated to helping people like Susan Driver deal with seeing things that they may not want to see. And in 2014, she found the website, and then she sent an email.
He and I exchanged emails. I told him what was going on. He sent me an email with how to cleanse my house, literally word for word, what to say, how to do it.
Susan called her adult son and asked him to help, and together they followed the directions on the email to cleanse their house. Now, I know it sounds absolutely ludicrous following directions on an email to rid one's house of demons, right? But, and here's the interesting part, according to Susan and her husband, since this cleansing, which again took place in 2014, she hasn't had any dark otherworldly feelings. She hasn't seen a single dark entity, nor has she even had one terrible nightmare. And it's been, what, 11 years now?
After that day, I've not had one horrific nightmare since, nor have I had any sightings of any creepy demons.
Well, the difference for me was that she didn't have any more nightmares. That pretty much stopped.
The experiences that we've shared in this video have happened to people who, for whatever reason, just saw something. And with Satin, well, she claims that she's had this ability her entire life. But can someone learn this ability? Well, we reached out to the website Seers See, and Amy got an interview with Doug Overmyer, and she asked him that very question.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for being on our show. Well, we have been speaking with some of our subscribers who can, I guess, see. What I want to know first is, why can some people see, as you talk about in the book Seers See, and why can't others?
It's basically an ability that some people are born with. It's, some people, you could call it a spiritual gift. It's an ability. It's just like the ability that some people have to sing on pitch, to hear and to sing on pitch. I can't sing on pitch. I can't sing anywhere near pitch. Some people have perfect pitch, right? And you're like, well, how come they can and I can't? And some people have certain physical abilities that other people don't. And seeing in the spirit realm just is one of those. Their brain is wired a certain way.
I'm curious, when you talked about your daughter, you talked a little bit about how sometimes she would say, don't you see that person on the deck? I see that person. So sometimes she was not terrified. Other times she was. And I know that you've worked with many seers throughout your years doing this work. And I'm curious, what makes some people absolutely terrified about what they can see, and what makes others accept it?
I think also ignorance. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just like not knowing opens you up to spiritual attack. And so the fear is the primary weapon of dark spirits. It's fear. Having knowledge brings peace, can bring peace.
Right. So it sounds a lot like what you're saying is, I don't want to overuse the phrase knowledge is power, but it sounds a lot like that's what you're saying. Once you understand what's going on in the spirit realm, then you can combat the fear and deal, I guess, with what is going on. So what are folks who see, what are seers seeing?
So seers are seeing all sorts of things in the spirit realm. They could be seeing demons. They could be seeing higher. Demons are sort of low-level spirits, but they're scary. They're terrifying. They could be seeing ghosts. They could be seeing the spirits of dead humans that, for whatever reason, are lingering in this plane until they move on. They could be seeing higher order spirits, and immediately they could be seeing nature spirits. Like there are spirits in nature. I think that some nature spirits they're not maybe sentient, but they're sort of like manifestations of chaos. So like chaos monsters, if you will. And some seers can see that. I think sometimes you can pick up the spirit of fear or anger or depression on a location. So you can go to a location and just feel like, oh, this is creepy. Like someone might say, oh, this is creepy. A seer can go, oh yeah, I know what's going on here. There's a murder in that room. There was a sexual assault in that room. And they can see it. Well, how can they see it? Seers are very sensitive, and they pick up all sorts of things in the spirit realm.
So you did say that it is a gift, and oftentimes seers are born with it. Sometimes they have a spiritual experience where they gain the ability to be a seer. Is there a way that anyone, me, I could somehow develop the skill?
Yeah. So I am aware that there's a couple of ways that can happen. I know some teachers will try to teach people how to see in the spirit realm. So I will just say in the book, an early draft, I had a strong argument against trying to do practices to see in the spirit realm. And one of the people who I had reviewing the book, who's a seer, she's also an Anglican minister and very smart. She challenged me on that and said, no, I don't, I said, okay. So I took it out and I said, that's not my lane. That's someone else's lane,
So it sounds like you're saying people can acquire this ability. Well, I've heard some people say that people with no spiritual sensitivity at all can maybe acquire it through the Ouija board. Others think the Ouija board is just evil. So what do you think about that?
I think they're deeply dangerous. I mean, why would you believe an unseen spirit? You call on a spirit and you're going to believe it is what it says it is. And you're going to think that the spirit that you don't know, that you've never met, maybe has an agenda that you don't know. And you ask it questions about your future and you're like, you think it has your best interest in heart. Why would you think it has your best interest in heart? You've never met the thing. And I it's just, it's like, for a long time, it was the highest selling board game, Ouija board, over Monopoly. We have two gods in this country, money, Monopoly, and, whatever it is that's behind the Ouija board.
So this was a fun one, right? Getting to meet a couple of our subscribers and talk to them at length.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite part of this whole thing. I thought Satin was really cool. It was really cool being able to, see her and see you guys go back and forth. I really enjoyed sitting down with Susan Driver and her husband. Her husband and I kind of relate to him, right? Because he's a skeptic, right? Mm-hmm. He's like you got to show me. And I hate sometimes being the skeptic in the group, right? I want to sit there and believe, but it's tough for me because you're trying to tell me that you see something here that I can't see and you feel something that I can't feel. I guess as Doug said, right? I'm spiritually off pitch. I don't know, but it's hard for me to believe. But then I think of people like William Butler Yeats, right? This prominent person, his entire life, he says he sees things that the rest of us can't. So I don't know. What about you?
Right. Well, I found it really interesting that Doug, his whole journey into looking into this started with his daughter and his child. And that made me think about from the mouths of babes, children seeing things. And I thought, we always discount that as maybe imagination. But what if it's not? What if they're closer to the spirit realm than any of us are? And then we just kind of beat it out of them. No, you didn't see anything. You didn't. No, it's not a monster. It's not a ghost. And so they just lose, I guess, the ability. So that's kind of where I come from is I feel like Susan and Satin, completely genuine, talking with them for hours and hours, talking to their family, made me believe that they definitely see something.
Yeah. One of the most fascinating parts of this whole thing was when Satin brought the story to you. She was like, I took his spirit to this grave and I was like, that's your grave. And sooner or later, I guess he accepted it because he went on. And then you started your research, right? And we had no idea. He kept saying, the spirit kept telling Satin, no, I was cremated. I was supposed to be cremated. And you call the cemetery and you're like, can we get some pictures of that plot for our video? And they're like, I'm sorry, ma'am, but he was cremated.
Ugh,
That was
chills.
that was crazy. You know, this story reminds me a little bit of what happened with Amy Hoffman and Nancy Weber. Nancy Weber, the psychic, and she's there where Amy Hoffman died, and supposedly the spirit of Amy Hoffman helps Nancy see the murder. And then Nancy goes on to help solve the case and actually gets the murderer to call the police and turn himself in. I thought that was insane.
Yeah.
If you guys want to see that, we did a complete mystery on it. It's fascinating, and it's here.